us with additional reporting. He's live at the White House. Chris, good to see you, and thank you for joining us. Paris and Washington seem to not be aligned on their approaches to Gaza. How does this impact the global response to the crisis there?
Good morning from Washington, D.C., Susan. Well, there's definitely tension and division among these two traditional allies. France has advocated for a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, while the U.S. is calling for a temporary ceasefire during Ramadan. Earlier this week, Washington abstained from that UN Security Council resolution vote calling for that temporary pause, and the resolution passed. The U.S. decision not to veto that resolution caused a chain reaction in Israel, which was supposed to send a delegation here to Washington, D.C. this week to discuss its plans for the ground invasion in Rafah, where 1.5 million Palestinian civilians are sheltering. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu canceled that visit in reaction to the U.S. abstention at the UN Security Council vote, but now has asked for this meeting to be rescheduled. French President Emmanuel Macron told Netanyahu earlier this week that he opposes any military operation in Rafah. Back to you.
Chris, has the U.S. managed to convince Israel not to conduct the Rafah operations?
So far, Washington is not using its military aid leverage to dictate Israel's next steps in Gaza, and there's no evidence that this is going to change. But U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with his Israeli counterpart, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, this week. Austin asked him to allow more humanitarian assistance into Gaza to avoid famine. In turn, Gallant asked the U.S. to provide more weapons to Israel. Now, the U.S. already provides $4 billion annually to Israel in weapons. $3.3 billion of that must be used to purchase U.S. weapons. Susan?
Okay, Chris, stay with us. I'd like to get more of your reporting on our next story as well. For the first time since it was overturned, Roe v. Wade, back in 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments on how patients can access mifepristone, which is the abortion pill. Diane Mitchell reports.
Less than 2 years after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a woman's constitutional right to an abortion in the United States, the High Court Tuesday heard arguments about the abortion pill mifepristone, which is the first of a 2-drug regimen commonly used in medication abortions. Doctors who oppose abortion rights want to undo recent decisions made by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, allowing mifepristone to be prescribed online and mailed to patients. Erin Hawley is senior counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative Christian legal advocacy group.
The FDA must answer for the damage that it has caused to the health of countless women and girls and the rule of law by failing to study how dangerous chemical abortion drugs are and unlawfully removing nearly every meaningful safeguard for those same drugs.
The FDA says it followed standard approval processes in that decision and argues that reversing it would undermine its authority to determine whether any drug is safe. Imani Wilson-Shabazz is with Plan C, a nonprofit national abortion pill access campaign.
It is a very safe medication to use at home, and people have been doing it for years. Like, the U.S. is kind of behind on the medication abortion regimen, and it's been around in a lot of other countries for a long time.
An investigation in the Journal of the American Medical Association this week found that the number of self-managed medication abortions rose after the Supreme Court ended constitutional protections in 2022 and allowed states to make their own abortion laws.
Yeah, so self-managed abortion in and of itself actually isn't illegal in most places. A lot of laws that we see kind of target medical providers who are sending pills to people, but a few states have enacted shield laws that allow for providers that are based in states like New York or Washington to actually send pills to people who are in restricted states.
If the High Court agrees to restrict mifepristone, more women may switch to using only the second drug in the current 2-step regimen. Health providers say misoprostol-only abortions generally take longer and produce more painful cramping. The Supreme Court is expected to announce its decision in June or early July. Dina Mitchell, VOA News.
Okay, Chris, what are the political observers citing as the main takeaways of the argument before the High Court this week?
Susan, political observers say a majority of the Supreme Court justices appeared skeptical of the idea that a nationwide ban is necessary for this so-called abortion pill. Even the conservative justices asked why the nation needs a national ban on the primary drug used for medication abortions, instead of allowing doctors that object to prescribing it for various reasons, like religious reasons, not to prescribe it. Those defending the use of the drug warned that if the courts overturned U.S. government drug approvals, it could open up any drug to challenges on ideological grounds. Observers say the justice asked a lot of detailed medical questions, seeking to understand the way mifepristone works and the ways various procedures are conducted around ending a pregnancy. Justices also raised questions about whether using postal delivery for mifepristone is lawful. Again, a decision is expected in the case by the end of June or into early July. Susan?
And Chris, of course, all of this has political implications, notably the abortion issue on U.S. politics. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it appears to continue to be a major driver, at least at the state level, in elections. In this case, a special election that just happened in Alabama, the Democrat supported abortion rights and in vitro fertilization in her advertising. She even spoke about her own experience with abortion, and she won that race overwhelmingly. Now, you might recall that Alabama is at the center of the issue because of a recent state Supreme Court ruling in February, which found that frozen embryos can be considered children under state law. Another state, South Dakota, stepped up its effort to help medical providers understand what they're allowed to do under its strict anti-abortion legislation. That state's governor, Kristi Noem, signed a law that is supposed to create a video and other explanatory materials for what is and what is not allowed under the state's abortion restrictions, which, again, are some of the strictest in the U.S. But it continues to be a major driver, and obviously Democrats want to make the upcoming presidential race with abortion and abortion rights as one of the main issues. Susan?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. VOA's Chris Casquejo joining us live from Washington, D.C. Chris, thank you so much for all of that.
Good to be with you.
Elections here in the U.S. may still be months away, but leaders are leaving no stone unturned in raising money for campaigns. Thursday saw New York host a glamorous fundraiser for U.S. President Joe Biden. The Biden camp, through ticket sales and contributions, managed to rake in a record amount of money, with collections as high as over $25 million. And this just from one event. The funds raked in by the U.S. president can be attributed to former presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, whose presence solidified Biden's re-election bid that has otherwise been marred by controversy. The star-studded event saw Democrats' old guards, the two former presidents, take center stage along with President Biden. Tickets for the fundraiser started at $250 and went as high as over $500,000. While the event may have been all glitz and glamour and a show of strength for Joe Biden among Democrats, the scenes outside the venue told a very different story. Hundreds of protesters gathered outside Radio City Music Hall, criticizing the U.S. president for the way he's handling the Gaza crisis. Protesters were seen waving Palestinian flags, with many saying that they will not be voting for the incumbent president in the upcoming elections.
No justice, no peace. No silence on our streets. No justice, no
In the elections, I will definitely not be voting for Trump and definitely not voting for Biden. It's unacceptable. We cannot in the United States support any presidential candidate or congressperson who supports genocide.
in the primary, I will not be voting for Joe Biden in the primary. I'm going to leave it blank in New York.
Following the event, Biden's political rival Donald Trump is now looking to break this record set by Joe Biden. The returning presidential candidate said that he will outraise Biden's fundraiser by raking in $33 million at his Florida event on April 6th. The fundraiser next month reportedly being organized by New York hedge fund billionaire John Paulson and lists several other high net worth individuals as well. Dengue cases are rising in the Americas. The cases in the last 3 months are more than the total cases in the last year alone, and experts see a potentially worsening situation for a dengue outbreak so far in the region. Most of the current cases are in the southern hemisphere. Almost 80% of the cases are reported in countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. Over 1,000 deaths have also been reported.
So probably this will be the worst dengue fever season in the Americas. For this reason, it's very important that the countries that are currently experiencing an increase in the transmission, that are experiencing epidemics, they need to redouble their efforts to provide more actions, to provide vector control.
It's especially concerning as cases are rising off-season. Usually dengue spikes during the wet season, which is still months away. And as per officials, some areas are reporting dengue for the first time. The virus is spread to people when they are bitten by infected mosquitoes. Factors such as rising temperatures, rapid urbanization, drought and flood, poor sanitation, and a lack of robust health systems in some countries are responsible for a surge in cases. Symptoms include fever, headache, vomiting, skin rashes, as well as muscle and joint pain. Severe cases can also turn out to be fatal. There's no specific treatment for the disease, and prevention from mosquito bite is recommended. Well, the total solar eclipse expected on the 8th of April is already inspiring school lessons in the United States. Schools in America are organizing group viewings for students to experience the once-in-a-lifetime daytime darkness experience and learn about the science behind the skeptical. This is Riverside School in Cleveland. 7th grade students are teaching their 2nd grade peers about the total solar eclipse.
I was teaching them about the solar eclipse and how the moon, earth, and the sun line up together, creating a shadow on the earth.
Cleveland will experience nearly 4 minutes of darkness during the total solar eclipse. Teacher Nancy Morris came up with the idea of mixing crafts, games, and models to educate and engage her students. She says the best way for older students to learn the subject is to teach younger ones.
I was really honestly so pleased with them because I saw a lot of kids who normally don't say too much really